expectations. That's whatever. In other words, everything, all frustration comes from unmet expectations or dashed expectations. It's not really about a circumstance. It's about what you thought the circumstance should be and it not being that way. No, it's very cold outside today. We wish it was warm. I wish it was warm. I'll take any day the heat of the summer, even at the New York heat of summer over this cold. You understand? Mm-hmm. But there's a caveat over this. There's a reason why I'd rather the heat of the summer. Because you always go into the house with air conditioning. Imagine it was 100 years ago. You're from New York. You're from Washington Heights. Mm-hmm. So can you imagine the summer, the heat of summer, which you know what it is? If there was no air conditioning anywhere.
My house is not air conditioning, but we have an old farmhouse.
Where is it?
Maryland.
Okay. So is that the same as over here?
No.
Same humidity and same everything? Yeah, I was there once actually for 3 weeks in the summer. It was brutal actually. It was like cheese, but it was like 4 years ago.
It's not fun then.
Okay, it's not fun.
It's alright, but you can deal with it.
Okay. But how did people deal with it? You know, people today think about it. What?
They dealt with it.
How? Can you imagine today having to deal with something?
They didn't know any different.
They had no expectation of anything else, right? So when you have no expectation of anything else, so you might grumble about the situation just like we might today grumble about the cold outside today, but it doesn't impact your emotional welfare. Of course it's cold. Of course it's hot outside. It's the summer. Okay, so is it comfortable? No. Am I sweating? No. Can I wait? You know, I wish I can maybe go to the beach or somewhere. Yeah, but it doesn't get you down. Doesn't get you depressed because there's no expectation. What bothers us is when we have an expectation for something we don't have it, and that's why today, thank God, our lifestyle is so high. Like we get depressed over and we get anxiety over things that our great grandparents or even people on the other side of the world, they just look at us like we're crazy. We have the least fortunate amongst us has is so much more than what so many other people have, and they're fine with it. They're content with it because they don't have any expectations for anything in life. Does that mean not to have any expectations in life? Not necessarily. Depends on what area. But one thing's for sure. You have to avoid unrealistic expectations because having an unrealistic expectation, if and when it gets dashed, you're setting yourself up for failure. So expectations, at the very least, always have to be realistic. So, I don't have a car. I know maybe it bothers me that I don't have a car, but it definitely doesn't bother me that I don't have wings. Why? If it would bother me that I have wings, that would be called an unrealistic expectation, and it'd be also being a little delusional. And that's what Dr. Rebbe is going to talk about. Consider this. This person, you, us, me, we're upset that we have struggles in life. What's your expectation? Why are you getting upset? If you're being upset, that means you had some sort of expectation, which is now being dashed. What was your expectation? It's time here for a little self-analysis, whatever you want to call it. Look at yourself and say, I'm struggling with this, and it's bothering me deeply. Why is it bothering me? Obviously, there's some sort of expectation that I'm not realizing here. What is that?
The expectation is that I should have been good enough to have already overcome this struggle, that it shouldn't be a struggle.
Right. And deep down, we're still believing that what our mother told us, that we're perfect little people, and we shouldn't be struggling. It's like being upset about not having wings. That's what Alfred was saying. To think that we shouldn't struggle is delusional. It's not realizing who we are. That is the essence of who we are. So Is it a frustration that we struggle? Of course it's a frustration. But there are a lot of frustrations in life which don't get us down because they're part of life. And when something is part of life, you make peace with it. You come to terms with it. That's what we have to do with our struggles. We have to make peace and come to terms with them. Not make peace with surrendering to our lower side. But the fact that life is a perpetual struggle for us, if we're to understand who we are, that we are what we call the Beinoni, in Tanya's language, which means we are people who struggle, then there's nothing what to be upset about. There's nothing. Yes, it's frustrating. Like I said, it's frustrating, but it's not. There's a difference between something which is frustrating and something which is emotionally devastating. Right? You find this in a variety of ways. It's just to beat that horse. Say one person has a mother who dies at the age of 100. Another person has a mother who dies at the age of 50 from cancer. Another person has a mother who dies at the age of 50, completely healthy, hit by a drunk driver. In terms of the grief that they're going to suffer, is there a difference between these three people? And what's the difference? Why is there a difference? All of them end result the same thing. They're all missing the companionship, the love of the mother. Which that is, someone asks, why is there tragedy when one's mother passes away? Because it's a mother. And you miss the mother. When you're 50, 70, the mother's 70, 100, doesn't make it. Obviously, you're presuming that the mother is still in a normal frame of mind. She's a mother. But it'll be totally different, the amount of grief and emotional trauma. And which one will be the worst traumatized? Right. So here there isn't even the age factor to say, well, so what's the difference? Dead.
Because when someone has a long disease or any disease, it does a couple of things. One, it gives you time to prepare because you know this is coming. You get the test results and you can see where it's going. And you don't have as much time as you'd like, but you have some time to talk through and to get ready to prepare for it. And also because there's so much pain on the other person's side, there's also a little bit of relief. You feel that, okay, they're out of pain. So there's something a little bit comforting about it. But when it's an accident, you have no time. You are just left.
What you're saying is definitely a factor, without a doubt a factor. There's something else here also, and in order to bring out the other point, so let's change that. Not dies of cancer, dies suddenly of cardiac arrest.
There's no perceived person who's done wrong specifically to the patient who dies of cardiac arrest, whereas with the case of a drunken driver, it's easy to say that person did wrong and we're suffering because of it.
Correct. So there's another person in the equation. Yeah.
But I think everyone's perceived that our mothers should live long, full lives, that we should have them until we die. So the fact that they're being cut off shorter and shorter and faster, it's like it's breaking those realities even more harshly. Yeah.
In other words, we expect our parents to die. So when it happens, it hurts, but it's not. In other words, when a parent dies at the age of 100, we actually say, "Thank God they lived a full life." We expect them to pass away till Mashiach comes. That's the way of the world. Parents die. So it hurts. There's no. I'm sure. Thank God. I have both parents, and I have no idea what the experience is, but you all know what parents are, and it obviously hurts. But there was no dashed expectations. When a parent dies at the age of 50, there was an expectation that I would spend more years, that my parent would enjoy the simchas of my children, and that's an expectation which I see everyone else has, and why not me? And there's a vast expectation over there. But at the end of the day, a medical issue, whether it's cancer, whether it's a heart attack, is still part of our somewhat part of our expectations. In other words, it's somewhat normal. It's not. You can't compare it to the drunk driver, where there is, by expectation, should be that it's a totally new level of broken expectations. It didn't have to be that way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is just to bring out the point I was talking about earlier. Something can hurt, but that hurt doesn't have to come with depression. It doesn't have to come with. Most people whose parents pass away at the age of 100, they don't become depressed because they sit here and they cry, it hurts, but you don't become depressed because of a broken expectation. The same thing is struggles in life. Yeah, they're difficult and they're miserable. And we can grumble about them a little in connection, but if it gets you down, if it really gets you down and gets you depressed, then there's something wrong with the way your expectations of yourself are. You're not really acknowledging who you are, and it's a little arrogant on your part. It's arrogant on your part to assume what you're really, in essence, saying, and as ridiculous as I'm a tzaddik. I should be a tzaddik, because only a tzaddik is perfect. And if you only recognize how distant you are from a tzaddik, and this is who you are, you're beginning you struggle, you know what? Well, you know what your expectation should be? It's to win your struggles. That's a reasonable expectation, but not to have struggles. That's not for you. Pretty amazing how Alter Rebbe shifts the perspective on struggles. So again, to recap, first Alter Rebbe said that a struggle is a mitzvah opportunity. So that's from a religious perspective. Don't be upset over a struggle because you're doing a mitzvah. And then number two, he goes on and says that if you were to properly see yourself for who you are, you'd realize that to be depressed over your struggles is arrogance, because you're setting expectations for yourself which aren't reasonable.
Did you see this movie, Life is Beautiful?
Sorry?
Did you see the movie, Life is Beautiful?
Not yet.
They're talking about this.
Last night was my opportunity. You should have told me yesterday.
The guy in the Constitution.
No, just speak.
So
Did everyone here see it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it talks about this from a big point of view, not the personal struggle, but the concentration camp. He's an Italian Jew. His wife is not Jewish, and they both get put in the concentration camp. But anyway, so his way he deals with it. He's by
With the
profession.
little kid? He's there with the little kid?
Yeah. See,
I've heard about it. I didn't see it, but I've heard some people have asked me about it. I should see it. My mother told me to see it. I haven't seen it.
So by profession, he's like a comedian, a street artist kind of thing, and he's very, I guess the best way to describe him, he's really not like your normal person in the first place. He's very has kind of a different take on things. So he gets thrown in the concentration camp, and that attitude, his attitude towards life, like he's in control of who he is because he approaches life with basically with humor and love, and he takes each moment as a separate case. I have a little bit of a conflict with this movie because with this concept, because of the way what they're putting out there is a little offensive, but it's a huge thing that they're saying in the movie, that any kind of horrific experience, like all the things that he witnesses in the concentration can be dealt with from this it's a very detached kind of point of view. You're suggesting something a little bit of a detachment, like detach yourself from exactly what's going on, and it's not a personal struggle, but why would we expect everything to be going our way? Like, you're not the center of the universe. And I agree that this is in the human development. You can get beyond the egocentricity of, oh, this is all happening because of me. God is doing this to me. Blah blah blah. So you're progressing out of that egocentricity. So this movie is taking that same concept and applying it to a situation that's really not personal. It's a war, and a group is being targeted.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But we're not talking so much here about egocentricity. We're talking here more about arrogance and specifically delusional thinking about self. In other words, not recognizing who you are. We're being realistic. About who you are, and you're a person who struggles. That's who you are. That's who you're going to be. And to think otherwise is leading yourself off to failure. And this is a topic you can take in so many different directions. It's so important in relationships. Almost all relationship problems happen from unmet expectations in the relationship. Take away those expectations. I know it's easy said, but take away. In other words, the more expectations we have entering the relationship, the more likely it's going to fail. We're going to encounter difficulties and problems. As opposed to if you accept an individual and everything becomes a plus, instead of, in other words, everything that you do give, because you have no expectation, whatever they give becomes an extra and something to celebrate. This idea of expectations is something which you could do a whole seminar if I was a mental health professional on how many different areas of life are impacted by this. But here we're just applying it in this narrow area of struggles in life. Yeah.
But you're talking about unrealistic expectations. You're not talking about not having.
You're talking about in terms of relationships?
In general.
In terms of relationships, practically any expectations are unrealistic. Almost. There are some very basic expectations, like your husband or spouse or whatever should be matched to you, and there's certain universal things that people have to do. But in general, the term expectation implies something you want the other to do.
Okay.
Marriage is not about you getting the other person to do anything.
Okay, as opposed to doing things together.
It's opposed to two people who like each other and get married to each other and accept each other.
So you're taking the difference between acceptance and expectation. All right.
Right. Although again,
there's no expectation.
Let's not make radical statements and say you can't have any expectations. Of course, every marriage comes home with certain expectations, certain things that every human being, and for sure every person in the marriage has to abide by. Again, without going into exactly the parameters, what it is, I'm not really professional in that area either.
No, I'm not asking that. I wasn't going in.
A little professional as I have is from my experience.
I just thinking that there have to be some standard.
Yeah. Yes.
Reciprocity.
Right. There are certainly personal expectations, like everybody has to be treated with respect,
yes.
etc.
Right.
Yes.
But where they're unrealistic and you haven't vocalized it so the other person doesn't even know, or they're just not even something they or you could achieve.
No, but also every expectation has to be measured. Let's see, is this something which is, I don't even like the word realistic, is this something which is, what?
Achievable?
Is this something which is really an expectation, which is a must for every person, or is this something that I'm trying to impose? That's, anyways, moving on. Okay, we've discussed 2 points in this chapter so far. Again, number 1 was how every struggle is in this opportunity. Number 2 is the psychological root of depression, which comes from our struggles. And now we're going to move on to a little Kabbalistic statement on the matter. But before we do that, let's do what's happening. All the papers?
Mm-hmm.
Are there?
There's only one.
They're towards the back.
Yeah, let's east. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, there's some hiding over here.
Great.
Says
Oh,
I'd be
there they
chapter
are.
15.
Okay.
That's fine. I want to repeat.
Organization.
I thought there's gonna be a lot of food here this morning after all the cooking classes last night.
We pretty much ate it all last night.
We ate the potato pool. That would be our stuff.
I think we ate the whole potato.
Yeah, okay.
That was fun
Soup.
though. I never
chilling.
fried potato. I thought it was a day night. I should fry this one.
Now I can fix myself.
Okay. Page, we're gonna start on page 355, where it says Va'adarabba. On the contrary, some sadness is due to conceit. Your guys are with me? Page 355. It says Va'adarabba to the contrary. Not only is there no reason, not only is there no valid reason why to be depressed because of our struggles, which as Altar says we should really be viewing as missed opportunities. To the contrary, if you think into where is this depression coming from, it is due to conceit, arrogance. The person is not cognizant of his true station, and therefore a person is depressed. That he's not a tzaddik, he's not perfect. Why do I have to struggle? Why can't it just be natural? Why can't it be easy? Because you're not a tzaddik. That's what a tzaddik is. And you're not a tzaddik yet in all areas of your life. So tzaddikim certainly don't have such foolish thoughts and temptations like this person's having, like the person who's struggling is having. But if we were to recognize our place, how distant we are from the level of tzaddik. And would only that we would be a Beinoni our entire life, and not a Rasha for even one moment. In other words, that is a reasonable expectation. That we should be a Beinoni, meaning, when you say that it gets scary, what I'm saying is, when you're having a struggle, the reasonable expectation is for you to be victorious in that struggle. That is reasonable. And if you don't win over the struggle, then you really do have somewhat reason to be upset. Although that was discussed in an earlier chapter, how to handle that. A Jew has no reason to be depressed, no excuse to be depressed ever. But the point is, if you fail your struggle, that is an expectation that you failed. Yes. And there is reason to be upset, although, I'll get to you in a second, although the upsetness has to be limited in time and in scope, as discussed elsewhere. But that's a reasonable expectation, that I should be victorious in my struggles. But that I shouldn't have struggles. This is the measure of the Beininim and their task. To conquer the Yitzhahara of our hearer and the thoughts of Ilam Alim Lameach that come up from the heart to the mind, to completely distract oneself from them with the canal, to push all such thoughts and temptations away, proverbially with two hands. Yeah.
So the fact that somebody even says to themselves, why can't I not struggle, why can't it just be easy, that further cements the fact that they're not a tzaddik, because a tzaddik who doesn't have these struggles, they're not thinking to themselves, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to deal with struggles. That's not even on their scope, they're serving Hashem. They're at the level where it's all about Hashem. They're not saying if it's easy or hard or lacking struggles or not. It's just about Hashem.
Okay.
I'm asking.
So, the question in a few words.
The question is the fact that a person even says they don't want struggles because they want it to be easy is reason enough to make them not tzaddik. The fact that their expectation is it should be easy.
I hear you. In other words, your depression itself shows how this you are from being a tzaddik. Because if you were a tzaddik, you wouldn't be preoccupied with yourself, and it wouldn't matter.
Is that what he's saying?
Sorry?
Is that what he's not saying?
Not saying that, no. But the truth is, it's interesting though. The Alter Rebbe will say a little later on. If you look later on in page 357, you see where it says, therefore one should not feel depressed? It's on this page. It's on the same page. It's on the other side. Read. Therefore
one should not feel depressed or very troubled at heart.
And skip until the next even.
Even if he be engaged in all his days in this conflict.
Stop. Is there one word over here in what you just read that seems to be a little extra?
All his days. Yeah.
Okay, another word.
Very troubled.
Very. In other words, let's stop there by saying to be troubled a little. It's fine. Just don't be very troubled about your struggles and your conflicts. Why is that?
This is the opposite of what we spoke about. You have to serve Hashem with joy.
On one hand, you have to serve Hashem with joy. You should not be depressed. But at the same time,
give it a little bit.
If it doesn't bother you at all, there's a problem.
Yeah, a little bit of getting down is productive almost in a sense where it keeps you on track. You know, if you didn't get sad about it, then you could just do whatever you wanted.
You're looking at it one way. You're saying it's productive, and let's forget about the productivity of it for a second. If you don't have it, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with you. It means you don't care enough. I'll give you an example. How many of you come from a shliach environment somewhere out there? Okay. So the Rebbe would send shluchim out. It was different 20 years ago than it is today. We saw the Rebbe, and obviously at that time, it was more difficult to go out. In other words, it was actually much easier than to have plenty of places to go today. To find a place to go is very difficult, but what are you leaving? You're leaving the experience of being by the Rebbe every day, by davening and by farbrengen and whatever. So people went. People went there. Why did people go anyways? Because the Rebbe asked them to. Okay? And were they completely depressed in their place over there that they're not by the Rebbe and they're missing everything out? Ultimately, you know, when they're impressed by Hashem, yeah, it's nice to be here by the Rebbe, but that's not what the Rebbe wants of us. That's not the job. That's not the point. It's not the purpose. The Rebbe wants the people to go out and be distant. The Rebbe said on many occasions, physical distance doesn't separate, and to the contrary, those of Meshluchim, spiritually closer when someone, and that's not just the person who has the title shliach, but anyone who is doing what the Rebbe wants and is in the Rebbe's employ. There's the spiritual closeness. So the shliach who goes out to Timbuktu and he gets to come to New York once every 2 years, barely sees the Rebbe. And it was in days before telephone, fax, telephone there was. You know, it costed incredible amounts of money. And he's all happy. He's going on shlichus, and he's there for a few years, and it never for a moment bothers him that he's far away. Because after all, he's doing what he's supposed to. He's doing what the Rebbe wants. What do you say about such a person? There's something missing there? If it doesn't bother him at all? If it doesn't, how can it not bother you? In other words, if you really, really enjoy, you know, to use a different example, if I have to, if my parents send me away to university, okay, so to Beijing, China, because that's the best place for me to study the field that I chose, and I don't see them for 3 years, and I miss my parents, whatever. So on one, I'm doing what my parents want. Am I depressed that I'm there? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. But if I don't miss my parents at all, because that's, what do you mean? Why should I be upset that I'm away from them? They want me to be here. What does that say about my relationship with them?
So is there an aspect of personal attachment and you know, personal desires that is positive in this case?
Let's try to be realistic and not just flying in the air. One day, in a few years now, we'll be sitting and talking about that. We'll be reaching that level of that. There's no, whether we should get rid of even that last vestige of, well, how do you term it? Personal
desire.
Yeah, but we're far from it. So let's leave that for an academic discussion another day.
Okay.
At least I am. There's natural desire, and then there's what our mind tells us we have to do despite that. God didn't put us here on this world always to do what's easiest, what's most spiritually delightful, etc. Spiritually delightful is to sit and study Torah all day, study Torah and daven and learn and be in kollel like they do in Lakewood. That's the non-Lubavitchers. They sit and they learn the entire day for their entire lives, and that's amazing. It's beautiful. That should make all of us jealous. What can be better than that? Can there be a better what?
I was just gonna say, I wouldn't be here learning if it was like that and not there. I hadn't been for like going.
You're absolutely correct. I'm not saying that's the correct path. I'm saying it. What I'm saying is that for personal growth and for personal spiritual progress, what can be more beautiful for a person than to sit the entire life secluded and separated from the world and to study Torah and to daven and to commune with God?
It's exactly what you said. You say outside of the world. It's your indoor world that you're not putting anything into practice.
So
you're not going out and practice anymore. So there is an element of that. You can't just sit and study and keep it all to yourself. That's not.
Why?
Because sure, Judaism is also very much action. You have to go out into the.
Okay, but that's
part of the real world.
I'm talking about what's personally fulfilling, and you're telling me about what's my duty. I'm not talking about duty right now. King David says in Tehillim, he says, Hashem, one thing I asked of God. You say to him, oh, it's in David Hashem Eiri. Say it in Elul every single day, twice a day. He says, one thing I have asked of God, this I seek, that I may dwell in the house of God all the days of my life, to behold the pleasantness of God and to visit the sanctuary. That's all he wanted. Sit in the house of God, in the shul, the beis medrash, to study, and to connect with God. What better life can there be? That's what the Jews in the desert wanted. That's why they didn't want to go into Israel. What? Go into Israel? To plow the fields and commerce and business and disgusting materiality. Let's stay in the desert and contemplate, meditate, study Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. What better life can there be? If we look at the person who's in kollel, we don't feel a tinge of jealousy, that means we're not getting it. That means we don't understand the beauty of Torah. That means we don't understand how incredible that life is. Now, am I advocating that approach to life? Of course not. Because as you guys are implying, there's duty besides that. There's what we have to do. And what does God want? God wants us to impact the world. God wants us to go into Israel, not stay in the desert. So we're in the world. But at the same time that we're in the world, if we don't feel some sort of jealousy, if it doesn't bother us, then we're like a kid in Beijing who doesn't bother that his parents. Why? Because my parents sent me here. It's our duty. Yeah, of course it's your duty to be there because you're supposed to be there. But if you don't miss it, that means you don't appreciate it. Following what I'm saying?
I follow.
Okay. So in other words,
Agree, but I follow.
and that's what we say. Al karchach, the neshama down here comes down here into this world very reluctantly. Although the neshama knows that it can achieve great heights over here on this world, incredibly greater than what it can. It's this world filled with the challenges and the pain and everything. There's a certain element that says, just leave me alone. Let me stay up here in Gan Eden. So there's always this dichotomy between what's called the words, the Kabbalistic words are ratzo v'shuv. Ratzo v'shuv is desire, longing, and shuv means returning to our purpose. But our purpose is almost never in line with what we want for. So the chassid wants to be by the Rebbe, but has to be in Kalamazoo. The chassid who doesn't bother him that he's being Kalamazoo isn't a real shliach. Think about that. The shliach who leaves Crown Heights and he's all excited and he's like, yeah, great, I'm leaving, and it doesn't bother him. It's not the point is it has to bother him. Not to be depressed. But what do you mean? To leave the confines of Crown Heights and the Rebbe's shul and to go off into a non-Jewish and a non-Orthodox environment is difficult. It has to be difficult. If it isn't difficult, it shows that you're not appreciating. You have to appreciate what you miss. You're not totally agreeing with what I'm saying. Okay, that's fine. We can agree
I,
to disagree.
right, and I think it's certainly on the first part about the like.
Okay.
What you're saying is just somebody who learns all day, so they're all giving into like the spiritual aspect of just getting all day. They're learning. It's all about them and connecting, which is what we should like almost want or be like. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Just to work on ourselves and be able to. Me being here right now all day and not having to work. I can't do this for the rest of my life. I wish, but I have other things to do. So the fact that they do, somehow that's what we should want.
Of course, that is the.
Yeah.
And where does it express itself? The difference is the person who's not who looks at it and says, what are you doing at night when you come home? If you're jealous of them, which means that you appreciate Torah study, you're going to open up your Torah book. In other words, if you love Torah study, how can you not? Recognize this connection. How can you not be jealous of someone who does it all day? Now, is that person doing the right thing? Not necessarily. But it's not about what's right or what's wrong. It's what's my natural desire is. So again, the shliach is jealous of the businessman who lives in Crown Heights. Now, who's doing the right thing? I'm not going to say the businessman doing the wrong thing, but I'm saying who's doing the righter thing? Who's the shliach? But is he a little jealous of the businessman who gets to go every single Shabbos to Farbrengen by the Rebbe? Yeah. What is the relevant? The same thing over here. Should we want to be at tzaddik? If you don't want to be at tzaddik, if there's no part, if you're like, oh, I'm a struggler, that's great. What do you do? I struggle all my life. I have this dark side within me, and I have temptations, and that's great because that's who I am, and I have no expectations. Otherwise, I'm just going to celebrate and rejoice. There's something wrong with you. Because when we look at a tzaddik, we see the sweetness of his service to God. When I say it's tzaddik, I don't mean necessarily there. I mean, as I said the other time, there's a tzaddik within each one of us. And we all have those areas in our life which are tzaddik-like. That area which I don't struggle in. And my service of God goes smooth and beautiful, and I'm passionate about it. And then there's those areas in life where very, very beginning. Again, there's the person as a whole. As a whole, we're not tzaddikim. But there's the tzaddik within the Beinani, and the Beinani within the Beinani, and the Rasha within the Beinani, as we discussed last time. And we all recognize the beauty and the sweetness of those areas in life which we're tzaddik-like. We look at the tzaddik and we see the service of God, which is effortless and smooth, where we feel like children of God, as opposed to servants of God, which is really the difference between the tzaddik and the Beinani, child versus the servant. And if that doesn't talk to you and appeal to you, and if you have no desire for that, big deal. There's something wrong. And that's why Dr. Rebbe says you shouldn't be very troubled by this, by your struggles, because we do have to keep perspective and realize that this is who we are and this is our task in life, to struggle, and we can't let it get depressed. But to say don't let it trouble you at all, if it doesn't trouble you at all, that's a sign of it's a sign of insensitivity and not appreciation. So that's why he says, don't feel depressed or very troubled. But a little trouble, you should feel. That's normal, that's natural to feel a little troubled with that. It's the contrary. If you don't feel a little troubled, then you got to ask yourself, why am I not feeling troubled? Because if you don't feel troubled at all, it's showing a lack of appreciation for what you're missing. That answer your question? No?
No, but you did earlier. So
Oh, okay.
that doesn't, but you did.
Okay, no, I think this can respond to something that you said about whatever. Okay. In Pirkei Avos, we say, Al karchach atachai, al karchach atames. Against your will you are alive, and against your will you dead. Another, against your will you're born, you're alive, and against your will a person dies. Which is a contradiction. Which one do we really want? Do we want to live, or do we want to not live? How can both of them be? I think chapter 4. Against your will you were created, against your will you were born, and against your will you will live, and against your will you will die. that bipolar? One of them has to be what we want, and then the other one is against our will. What? They're all. So that's the answer. Against your will you live. In other words, when the neshama comes down here, the neshama doesn't want to come down into the body. Because
here though, it
but it also doesn't want to die because it recognizes the value down here. That's the economy. This constant struggle is, on the one hand, the job of the neshama is to be down here. On the one hand, the great heights that it can accomplish over here it can't do anything near that in Gan Eden. But does that mean that the neshama is excited to come here?
No, because it has to.
So saying purpose and the heart is not always in tune with what has to be done, and that's what it's supposed to be. So it's supposed to be. Sometimes we have to do things and we don't necessarily appreciate it. We have to do them. Now we can't let those things get us depressed because we have to understand it's part of our task in life. But at the same time, it's a very shallow person who says, because I have to do it, therefore it can't bother me at all. Making sense?
It's not authentic, not being genuine.
And if it is being genuine to yourself, you have to ask yourself whether that myself I'm happy with, or maybe there's something wrong with it. Oops. It's like a parent that has to discipline a child. It has to be done. Yeah. Is it pleasant? Does it bother you? Yeah. But is it going to get you depressed? No, not the disciplining, maybe what your child did. But okay, moving on. So the next Alter Rebbe is, so again, we had so far two things. A, mitzvah opportunity. B, expectations. And then we also discussed this idea of, just now, number C, the third point we discussed so far in this chapter. A little out of order is the idea of, it shouldn't trouble us a lot, but a little. I'm not going to say it should trouble you a little. In other words, you should work on getting it to trouble you. But it's natural. In other words, and for most of us, we don't have to worry about that. We will be a little in trouble. If anything, our job is to make sure we don't be very troubled. Because most of us are troubled a little by our struggles. So it's not Now, and next we're going to move to a little of a Kabbalistic understanding of this concept. That is like this. Kabbalah teaches, and as explained in Chassidus, that there's something called a Seder Hishtalshalos. Familiar with that term? A chain of devolution, you want to call it, from godliness. That from God Himself emanates certain, we call it light. Obviously, that's a metaphor for whatever you want to call it, energy, whatever it may be. And that divine energy contracts and takes on various forms and shapes until finally, in its very, very, very devolved form, it reaches us here in this world. We are the bottom rung in what's called the Seder Yishtalshalos, in this chain, the spiritual chain, which includes an infinite amount of worlds, realms, and domains, etc. We're all the way in the bottom. So there's an assembly line. We're at the receiving end, at the very, very end of it. A very, very long assembly line. The ironic part about this is, however, that just like every single assembly line, there's the levers and the buttons which are pushed and pulled to make everything run. Who controls the levers and the buttons? We do. So here we are at the bottom. All the machinery on top of us, but we have the controls. We decide what gets turned on, when it gets turned on, how it gets turned on, etc. We have to know that anything that goes on above is from us. Because God, the behavior in the divine world totally reflects our behavior. Because ultimately, we might be at the bottom, we're the purpose, we're the goal, we're the objective. And everything and everyone looks to us, and our actions dictate what happens above. And this is a basic concept called midah keneged midah, measure for measure. When we act with kindness, we activate the kindness pipe, and that's basically the way it works. Whatever we do over here causes a ripple effect or a corresponding effect in the worlds above. And the human being actually is a microcosm of all of creation, of all the spiritual worlds. Just like within us, within every single one of us, we have the godly soul, the divine soul, and we have the power of klipa within us also. In a cosmic sense, you have that in the world also. You have the power of, you have God's energy and light, and then you have the power of klipa, which tries to cover and obscure the divine energy. And the way we handle the klipa in our personal life causes a ripple effect, a corresponding effect above. The klipa above in all the higher worlds. When we struggle with our darkness and we suppress it, not defeat it, we're being nice, but we subjugate it, we subdue it. The exact same thing happens above. The cosmic power of klipa becomes subdued and weakened. The word klipa means a shell. That's what klipa means. It covers up. And what happens is, because godliness, God's presence, and God's energy to expand and to be manifest in the higher worlds, and as we'll see later in the chapter, we benefit from that also. So, going back to what we started the chapter with, what do we accomplish by struggling with evil? Is it just like avoiding the poison? So the first thing we said is that we get reward as if we did a mitzvah. And now we're going to move on to say, as we will talk, God willing, continue tomorrow, is Kabbalistic, according to Kabbalah, it has a major, every time we have a struggle and we're able to defeat the darkness and the temptation within us, it has a cosmic effect. One which gives God a lot of pleasure. To be continued.
Thank you.
Oops.
I'm gonna hang on to it. Thank you.
Because I feel like this one before, where like people in the tour with me are like super feminists and like, oh, Midwest is a horrible place. Like, no, Midwest is a beautiful, wonderful place. And so like, yeah.
Let's see, any super feminists here? We're good.
All super feminists. I'm
but not like that.
Like, I'm a feminist, but like, I like don't have to be proud of my Judaism. I don't need to act like a man. I can be a woman and still be strongly Jewish and do women's mitzvahs. I don't have to take on men's mitzvahs.
Wait a minute, you can be being proud of being a woman and stuff.
Hold on, is anyone
But I mean,
saying
people are like, well, I want to be like
Okay.
a Jewish person, so I'm not a
I
man.
don't
No, I can be a woman.
But
I
I
want
would
to
sort
be
of
man,
like,
whatever.
like, I'm so proud to be a man, and that's like masculinism. No, that's like expected.
Right.
Yeah.
These things are not going to be a misogynist. Your wife thinks